Do we need Murderbot?
Acting a little funny. Because the scanner sucked corporation balls, Pinley muttered. Should we land? Mensa said. I realized she was asking me for a security assessment. The scans were sort of working and marking some hazards, but they weren't any different hazards from what we'd run into before. I said we could, but we know there's at least one life form here that tunnels through rock. Arata bounced a little in her seat, like she was impatient to get going. I know we have to be cautious, but I think we'd be safer if we knew whether these blank patches on the satellite scan were accidental or deliberate. That was when I realized they weren't ignoring the possibility of sabotage. I should have realized it earlier, when Pinley asked if hub system could be hacked. But humans had been looking at me, and I had just wanted to get out of there. Rati and Pinley seconded her, and Mensa made her decision. We'll land and take samples. Over the comm from the habitat, Bharadwaj's voice said, please be careful. She still sounded shaky. Mensa took us down gently, the hopper's pads touching the ground with hardly a thump. I was already up and at the hatch. The humans had their suit helmets on, so I opened the hatch and let the ramp drop. Close up, the rocky patches still looked like glass, mostly black, but with different colors running into each other. This near to the ground, the hopper's scan was able to confirm that seismic activity was null. But I walked out a little bit, as if giving anything out there a chance to attack me. If the humans see me actually doing my job, it helps keep suspicions from forming about faulty governor modules. Mensa climbed down with Arata behind her. They moved around, taking more readings with their portable scanners. Then the others got the sample kits out and started chipping off pieces of the glass rock, scooping up dirt and bits of plant matter. They were murmuring to each other a lot, and to the others back at the habitat. They were sending the data to the feed, but I wasn't paying attention. It was an odd spot, quiet compared to the other places we'd surveyed, with not much bird thing noise and no sign of animal movement. Maybe the rocky patches kept them away. I walked out a little way, past a couple of lakes, almost expecting to see something under the surface. Dead bodies, maybe. I'd seen plenty of those, and caused plenty of those, on past contracts, but this one had been dead body heavy so far. It made for a nice change. Mensa had set a survey perimeter, marking all the areas the area scanned and flagged as hazardous or potentially hazardous. I checked on everybody again and saw Arata and Rati heading directly for one of the hazard markers. I expected them to stop at the perimeter, since they'd been pretty consistently cautious on the other assessments. I started moving in that direction anyway. Then they passed the perimeter. I started to run. I sent Mensa my field camera feed and used the voice comm to say, Dr. Arata, Dr. Rati, please stop. You're past the perimeter and nearing a hazard marker. We are? Rati sounded completely baffled. Fortunately, they both stopped. By the time I got there, they both had their maps up in my feed. I don't understand what's wrong, Arata said, confused. I don't see the hazard marker. She had tagged both their positions on the maps that were well within the perimeter, heading toward a wetland area. It took me a second to see what the problem was. Then I superimposed my map, the actual map, over theirs and sent that to Mensa. Shit, she said over the comm. Rati, Arata, Your map is wrong. How did that happen? It's a glitch, Pacha said. He grimaced, studying the displays in his feed. It's wiped out all the markers on this side. So that was how I spent the rest of the morning, shooing humans away from hazard markers they couldn't see, while Pin Lee cursed a lot and tried to get the mapping scanner to work. I'm beginning to think these missing sections are just a mapping error. Rati said at one point, panting. He had walked into what they called a hot mud pit, and I had to pull him out. We were both covered with acidic mud to the waist. You think? Penny answered tiredly. When Mensa told us to head back to the hopper, it was a relief all around. We got back to the habitat with no problems, which felt like it was starting to become an unusual occurrence. The humans went to analyze their data, and I went to hide in the ready room, check the security feeds, and then lie in my cubicle and watch media for a while. I'd just done another perimeter walk and checked the drones when the feed informed me that Hub System had updates from the satellite and there was a package for me. I have a trick where I make Hub System think I received it and then just put it in external storage. I don't do automated package updates anymore, now that I don't have to. When I felt like it, presumably sometime before it was time to leave the planet, I'd go through the update and apply the parts I wanted and delete the rest. It was a typical boring day, in other words. If Bharadwaj wasn't still recuperating in medical, you could almost forget what had happened. But at the end of the day cycle, Dr. Mensa called me again and said, I think we have a problem. We can't contact Doubtful. I went to the crew hub where Mensa and all the others were. They had pulled up the maps and scans of where we were versus where Doubtful was, and the curve of the planet hung glittering in the air in the big display. When I got there, Mensa was saying, I've checked the big hopper's specs, and we can make it there and back without a recharge. I had my helmet plate opaqued, so I could wince a lot without any of them knowing. You don't think they'll let us recharge at their habitat? Arata asked, then looked around when the others stared at her. What? She demanded. Oversay put an arm around her and squeezed her shoulder. If they aren't answering our calls, they might be hurt, or their habitat is damaged, she said. As a couple, they were always so nice to each other. The whole group had been remarkably drama-free so far, which I appreciated. The last few contracts had been like being an involuntary bystander in one of the entertainment feed's multi-partner relationship serials, except I'd hated the whole cast. Mensa nodded. That's my concern, especially if their survey package was missing potential hazard information the way ours is. Arata looked like it was just occurring to her that everybody over in Delphal might be dead.
Yeah, I'm here.
Rati said,
I'm sorry, it's scary.
The thing that worries me is that their emergency beacon didn't launch. If the habitat was breached, or if there was a medical emergency they couldn't handle, their hub system should have triggered the beacon automatically. Each survey team has its own beacon, set up a safe distance from the habitat. It would launch into a low orbit and send a pulse toward the wormhole, which would get zapped, or whatever happened in the wormhole, and the company network would get it. And the pickup transport would be sent now, instead of waiting until the end of project date. That was how it was supposed to work. Anyway, usually. Mensa's expression said she was worried. She looked at me. What do you think? It took me 2 seconds to realize she was talking to me. Fortunately, since it seemed like we were really doing this, I had actually been paying attention and didn't need to play the conversation back. I said, they have 3 contracted sec units, but if their habitat was hit by a hostile as big or bigger than Hostile 1, their comm equipment could have been damaged. Pin Lee was calling up specs for the beacons. Aren't the emergency beacons designed to trigger even if the rest of the comm equipment is destroyed? The other good thing about my hacked governor module is that I could ignore the governor's instructions to defend the stupid company. They're supposed to be able to, but equipment failures aren't unknown. There was a moment where they all thought about potential equipment failures in their habitat, maybe including the big hopper which they were about to fly out of range of the little hopper. So if something happened to it, they were walking back. And swimming back, since that was an ocean-sized body of water between the 2 points on the map. Or drown. I guess they could just drown. If you were wondering why I was wincing earlier, this would be the reason. The trip to the map's blackout region had been a little out of our assessment parameters, but this was going to be an overnight trip. Even if all they did was get there, see a bunch of dead people, turn around, and go back. Then Garathan said, "What about your systems?" I didn't turn my helmet toward him because that can be intimidating, and it's especially important for me to resist that urge. I carefully monitor my own systems. What else did he think I was going to say? It didn't matter. I'm not refundable. Valescu cleared his throat. So we should prepare for a rescue mission. He looked okay, but MedSystem's feed was still reporting some indicators of distress. Bharadwaj was stable, but not allowed to get out of medical yet. He continued, "I've pulled some instructions from the Hopper's info package." Yes, instructions. They're academics, surveyors, researchers, not action hero explorers from the serials I liked because they were unrealistic and not depressing and sordid like reality. I said, "Dr. Mensa, I think I should go along." I could see her notes in the feed, so I knew she meant for me to stay here and watch the habitat and guard everybody who wasn't going. She was taking pin lead because she had past experience in habitat and shelter construction, Rati, who was a biologist, and Oversay, who was certified as a field medic. Mensa hesitated, thinking about it, and I could tell she was debating protecting the habitat and the group staying behind, with the possibility of whatever had hit Delpfall still being there. She took a breath, and I knew she was going to tell me to stay here, and I just thought, that's a bad idea. I couldn't explain to myself why. It was one of those impulses that comes from my organic parts that the governor is supposed to squash. I said, "As the only one here with experience in these situations, I'm your best resource." Garathan said, "What situations?" Rati gave him a bemused look. "This situation. The unknown. Strange threats. Monsters exploding out of the ground." I was glad I wasn't the only one who thought it was a dumb question. Garathan wasn't as talkative as the others, so I didn't have much of a sense of his personality. He was the only augmented human in the group, so maybe he felt like an outsider, or something, even though the others clearly liked him. I clarified, situations where personnel might be injured due to attack by planetary hazards. Arata came in on my side. "I agree. I think you should take SecUnit. You don't know what's out there." Mensa was still undecided. "Depending on what we find, we may be gone as long as 2 or 3 days." Arata waved a hand indicating the habitat. "Nothing's bothered us here so far." That was probably what Delpfall had thought, right before they got eaten or torn to pieces or whatever. But Valescu said, "I admit it would make me feel better about it." From medical, Bharadwaj tapped into the feed to add her vote for me. Garathan was the only one staying behind who didn't say anything. Mensa nodded firmly. "All right then, it's decided. Now let's get moving." So I prepped the big hopper to go to the other side of the planet. And yes, I had to pull up the instructions. I checked it over as much as I could, remembering how the autopilot had cut out suddenly in the little hopper. But we hadn't used the big hopper since Mensa had taken it up to check it out when we arrived. You had to check everything out and log any problems immediately when you took delivery or the company wasn't viable. But everything looked okay, or at least matched what the specs said it was supposed to match. It was only there for emergencies, and if this thing with Delpfall hadn't happened, We would probably never have touched it until it was time to lift it onto our pickup transport. Mensa came to do her own check of the hopper and told me to pack some extra emergency supplies for the Deltfall staff. I did it, and I hoped for the humans' sake we would need them. I thought it was likely that the only supplies we would need for Deltfall was the post-mortem kind, but you may have noticed that when I do manage to care, I'm a pessimist. When everything was ready, Oversay, Rati, and Pinley climbed in, and I stood hopefully by the cargo pod. Mensa pointed at the cabin. I winced behind my opaque faceplate and climbed in. Chapter 4. We flew through the night, the humans taking scans and discussing the new terrain past our assessment range. It was especially interesting for them to see what was there, now that we knew our map wasn't exactly reliable. Mensa gave everybody watch shifts, including me. This was new, but not unwelcome, as it meant I had blocks of time where I wasn't supposed to be paying attention and didn't have to fake it. Mensa, Pinley, and Oversay were all taking turns as pilot and co-pilot, so I didn't have to worry so much about the autopilot trying to kill us, and I could go on standby and watch my stored supply of cereals. We'd been in the air a while, and Mensa was piloting Pinley in the co-pilot seat when Rati turned in his seat to face me and said, "We heard. We were given to understand that imitative human bot movements are partially constructed from clone material." Warily, I stopped the show I was watching. I didn't like where this might go. All of that information is in the Common Knowledge database, plus in the brochure the company provides with the specifics of the types of units they use, which he knew, being a scientist and whatever, and he wasn't the kind of human who asked about things when he could look them up himself through a feed. "That's true," I said, very careful to make my voice sound just as neutral as always. Rati's expression was troubled. "But surely, it's clear you have feelings." I flinched. I couldn't help it. Oversay had been working in the feed, analyzing data from the assessments. She looked up, frowning. "Rati, what are you doing?" Rati shifted guiltily. "I know Mensa asked us not to, but..." He waved a hand. "You saw it." Oversay pulled her interface off. "You're upsetting it," she said, teeth gritted. "That's my point." He gestured in frustration. "The practice is disgusting. It's horrible. It's slavery. This is no more a machine than Garothan is." Exasperated, Oversay said, "And you don't think it knows that?" "I'm supposed to let the clients do and say whatever they want to me, and with an intact governor module, I wouldn't have a choice. I'm also not supposed to snitch on clients to anybody except the company. But it was either that or jump out the hatch." I sent the conversation into the feed, tagged for Mensa. From the cockpit, she shouted, "Rati, we talked about this." I slid out of the seat and went to the back of the hopper, as far away as I could get, facing the supply lockers in the head. It was a mistake. It wasn't a normal thing for a sec unit with an intact governor module to do, but they didn't notice. "I'll apologize," Rati was saying. "Now, just leave it alone," Mensa told him. "That would just make it worse," Oversay added. I stood there until they all calmed down and got quiet again, then slid into a seat in the back and resumed the cereal I was watching. It was the middle of the night when I felt the feed drop out. I hadn't been using it, but I had the sec system feeds from the drones and the interior cameras back-burnered and was accessing them occasionally to make sure everything was okay. The humans left behind in the habitat were more active than they usually were at this time, probably anxious about what we were going to find at Deltfall. I was hearing Arata walk around occasionally, though Valescu was snoring off and on in his bunk. Bharadwaj had been able to move back to her own quarters, but was restless, going over her field notes through the feed. Garathan was in the hub doing something on his personal system. I wondered what he was doing, and I just started to carefully poke around through Hub system to find out. When the feed dropped, it was like someone slapped the organic part of my brain. I sat up and said, "The satellite went down." The others, except for Pit Lee, who was piloting, all grabbed for their interfaces. I saw their expressions when they felt the silence. Mensa pushed out of her seat and came to the back. "Are you sure it was the satellite?" "I'm sure," I told her. "I'm pinging it, but there's no response." We still had our local feed running on the Hopper's system, so we could communicate through it as well as the comm and share data with each other. We just didn't have nearly as much data as we'd have had if we were still attached to Hub system. We were far enough away that we needed the comm satellite as a relay. Rati switched his interface to the Hopper's feed and started checking the scans. There was nothing on them except empty sky. I had them back burnered, but I'd set them to notify me if they encountered anything like an energy reading or a large life sign. He said, "I just felt a chill. Did anyone else feel a chill?" "A little."
My
"You were
goodness.
saying that it's a weird coincidence, isn't it? The damn satellites
It does
have
not need to
periodic
be that
outages since
loud,
we
huh,
got here,"
dude?
Pinley pointed out from the cockpit. "We just don't normally need it for comms." She was right. I was supposed to check their personal logs periodically in case they were plotting to defraud the company or murder each other or something. And the last time I'd looked at Pinley's, she had been tracking the satellite problems, trying to figure out if there was a pattern. It was one of the many things I didn't care about because the entertainment feed was only updated occasionally, and I downloaded it for local storage. Rati shook his head. "But this is the first time we've been far enough from the habitat to need it for comm contact. It just seems odd, and not in a good way." Mensa looked around at them. "Does anyone want to turn back?" I did, but I didn't get a vote. The others sat there for a quiet moment, and Oversay said, "If it turns out the Deltfall did need help, didn't go, how would we feel? If there's a chance we can save lives, we have to take it." Pinley agreed. Rati sighed. "No, you're right. I'd feel terrible if anyone died because we were overcautious." "We're agreed then," Benson said. "Keep going." I would have preferred they be overcautious. I had had contracts before where the company's equipment glitched this badly, but there was just something about this that made me think it was more. But all I had was the feeling. I had 4 hours to my next scheduled watch, so I went into standby and buried myself in the downloads I'd stored already. It was dawn when we got there. Deltfall had established their camp in a wide valley surrounded by high mountains. A spider web of creek beds cut through the grass and stubby trees. They were a bigger operation than ours, with 3 linked habitats and a shelter for surface vehicles, plus a landing area for 2 large hoppers, a cargo hauler, and 3 small haulers. It was all company equipment, though, per contract, and all subject to the same malfunctions as the crap they built on us. There was no one outside, no movement, no sign of damage, no sign any hostile fauna had approached. The satellite was still dead, but Mensa had been trying to get the Deltafall habitat on the comm since we had come within range. "Are they missing any transports?" Mensa asked. Rati checked the record of what they were supposed to have, which I'd copied from the hub system before we left. "No, the hoppers are all there. Their ground vehicles are in that shelter, I think." I had moved up to the front as we got closer. Standing behind the pilot's seat, I said, "Dr. Mensa, I recommend you land outside their perimeter." Through the local feed, I sent her all the info I had, which was that their automated systems were responding to the things the hopper was sending. That was it. I had to answer the question, so I said, security protocol. It sounded good. It didn't commit me to anything. No one outside, no one answering the call. Unless they had all jumped in their surface vehicles and gone off on vacation, leaving their hub and second units shut down, they were dead. Pessimism confirmed. But we couldn't be sure without looking. The Hopper scanners can't see inside the habitats because of the shielding that's related to protect proprietary data, so we couldn't get any life signs or energy readings. This is why I didn't want to come. I've got 4 perfectly good humans here, and I didn't want them to get killed by whatever took out Delphal. It's not like I cared about them personally, but it would look bad on my record, and my record was already pretty terrible. We're just being cautious, Mensa said, answering over Zen. She took the Hopper down at the edge of the valley on the far side of the streams. I gave Mensa a few hints through the feed that they should break out the handholds and survive the hit. Rati should stay behind inside the Hopper with the hatch sealed and locked, since he'd never done the weapon training course, and that most important, I should go first. Quiet. Subdued. Up until now, I think they had all been looking at this as probably a natural disaster, that they were going to be digging survivors out of a collapsed habitat or helping fight off a herd of hostile ones. This was something else. Mensa gave the orders, and we started forward, me in front, the humans a few steps behind. They were in their full suits with helmets, which gave some protection but had been meant for environmental hazards. Not some other heavily armed human or angry malfunctioning rogue sec unit, deliberately trying to kill them. I was more nervous than Rati, who was jittery on our comms, monitoring the scans and basically telling us to be careful every other step. I had my built-in energy weapons and the big projectile gun I was cradling. I also had 6 drones, pulled from the Hopper's supply and under my control through its feed. They were the small kind, barely a centimeter across, no weapons, just cameras. They make some which aren't much bigger and have a small pulse weapon, but you have to get one of the upper-tier company packages, mostly designed for much larger contracts. I told the drones to get in the air and gave them a scouting pattern. I did that because it seemed sensible, not because I knew what I was doing. I am not a combat murder bot, I'm security. I keep things from attacking the Alliance and try to gently discourage the Alliance from attacking each other. I was way out of my depth here, which was another reason I hadn't wanted the humans to come here. We crossed the shallow streams, sending a group of water invertebrates scattering away from our wheels.
I know, baby. It's
The trees
spooky.
were short and sparse enough that I had a good view of the camp from this angle. I couldn't detect any Delphal security drones by eye or with the scanners on the drones. Rati in the Hopper wasn't picking up anything either. I really wished I could pinpoint the location of those 3 sec-units, but I wasn't getting anything from them. Sec-units aren't sentimental about each other. We aren't friends, or the way our humans are. We can't trust each other, even if we work together. Even if you don't have clients who decide to maintain themselves by ordering their sec-units to fight each other. The scans read the perimeter sensors as dead, and the drones weren't picking up any warning indicators. The Delphal hub system was down. Without it, no one inside could access the comms theoretically. Crossed over and into the landing area from their hoppers. They were between us and the first habitat, the vehicle storage to one side. I was leading us in at an angle, trying to get a visual on the main habitat, but I was also checking the ground. It was mostly bare of grass from all the foot traffic and hopper lanes. From the weather report we'd gotten before the satellite quit, it had rained here last night, and the mud had hardened. No activity since then. I passed that info to Mensa through the feed. She told the others, keeping her voice low and listen. Something never happened. Well, everything. no reason to whisper, but I understood the impulse. There's no one else on the planet. There's not supposed to be anyone else on this planet, Lottie said, darkly, over the comm from our hopper. There were 3 sec units who were not me on this planet, and that was dangerous enough. I got my visual on the main habitat hatch and saw it was shut, no sign of anything forcing its way inside. The drones had circled the whole structure by now and showed me the other entrances were the same. That was that. Hostile fauna don't come to the door and ask to be let inside. I sent the images to Mensa's feed and said aloud, Dr. Mensa, it would be better if I went ahead. She hesitated, reviewing what I just sent her. I saw her shoulders tense. I think she had just come to the same conclusion I had, or at least admitted to herself that it was the strongest possibility. She said, all right, we'll wait here. Make sure we can monitor. She'd said we, and she wouldn't have said that if she didn't mean it, unlike some clients I'd had. I sent my field camera's feed to all 4 of them and started forward. I called 4 of the drones back, leaving 2 to keep circling the perimeter. I checked the vehicle shed as I moved past it. It was open on one side, and some sealed lockers in the back for storage. All 4 of their surface vehicles were there, powered down, no sign of recent tracks, so I didn't go in. I wouldn't bother searching the small storage spaces until we got down to the looking for all the body parts phase. I walked up to the hatch of the first habitat. We didn't have an entry code, so I was expecting to have to blow the door, but when I tapped the button, it slid open for me. I told Mensa through the feed that I wouldn't speak aloud in the comm anymore. She tapped back an acknowledgement on the feed, and I heard her telling the others to get off my feed and my comm, that she was going to be the only one speaking to me so I wasn't distracted. Mensa underestimated my ability to make arguments, but I appreciated the thought. Rati
Is
whispered,
it so
be
spoopy?
careful, and signed off. I had the weapon up going in, through the suit locker area, and into the first corridor. No suits missing, Mensa said in my ear, watching the field camera. I sent my 4 drones ahead, maintaining an interior scouting pattern. This was a nicer habitat than ours. Wider halls, newer, also empty, silent. The smell of decaying flesh drifting through my helmet filters. I headed toward the hub, where their main crew area should be. The lights were still on, and air whispered through the vents, but I couldn't get into their sec system with their feet down. I missed my cameras. At the door to the hub, I found their first second. It was sprawled on its back on the floor, the armor over its chest pierced by something that made a hole, approximately 10 centimeters wide and a little deep. We're hard to kill. That'll do it. I did a brief scan to make sure it was inert, then stepped over it and through into the crew area. There were 11 messily dead humans in the hub, sprawled on the floor, in chairs, the monitoring stations and projection surfaces behind them showing impact damage from projectile and energy weapon fire. I tapped the feed and asked Mensa to fall back to the hopper. She acknowledged me, and I got confirmation from my outside drones that the humans were retreating. I went out the opposite door to a corridor that led toward the mess hall and medical cabins. The drones were telling me the layout was very similar to our habitat, except for the occasional dead person sprawled in the corridors. The weapon that had taken out the dead sec unit wasn't in the hub, and it had died with its back to the door. The Deltfall humans had had some warning, enough to start getting up and heading for the other exits, but something else had come in from this direction and trapped them. I thought that sec unit had been killed trying to protect the hub, which meant I was looking for the other 2 sec units. Maybe these clients had been terrible and abusive. Maybe they had deserved it. I didn't care. Nobody was touching my humans. To make sure of that, I had to kill these 2 rogue units. I could have pulled out at this point, sabotaged the hoppers, and got my humans out of there, leaving the rogue units stuck on the other side of an ocean. That would have been the smart thing to do. But I wanted to kill them. One of my drones found 2 humans dead in the mess. No warning. They had been taking food packs out of the heating cubby, getting the tables ready for a meal. While I moved through the corridors of rooms, I was doing an image search against the hopper's equipment database. The dead unit had probably been killed by a mineral survey tool, like a pressure or sonic drill. We had one on the hopper, part of the standard equipment. You would have to get close to use it with enough force to pierce armor, maybe a little more than a meter. Because you can't walk up to another murder bot with an armor-piercing projectile or energy weapon inside the habitat and not be looked at with suspicion. You can walk up to a fellow murder bot with a tool that a human might have asked you to get. By the time I reached the other side of the structure, the drones had cleared the first habitat. I stood in the hatchway at the top of the narrow corridor that led to the second. A human lay at the opposite end, half in, half out of the open hatch. To get into the next habitat, I'd have to step over her to push the door all the way open. I could tell already that something was wrong about the body position. I used the magnification on the field camera to get a closer view of the skin on the outstretched arm. The lividity was wrong. She had been shot in the chest and the face, and on her back for some time. Then had moved to eat. Probably as soon as they picked up our hopper on the way here. On the feed, I told Mensa what I needed her to do. She didn't ask questions. She'd been watching my field camera, and she knew by now what we were dealing with. She tapped back to acknowledge me, then said aloud on comm, "Sec unit, I want you to hold your position until I get there." I said, "Yes, Dr. Mensa," and eased back out of the hatch. I moved fast, back to the security-ready room. It was nice having a human smart enough to work with like this. Our model of habitat didn't have it, but on these bigger ones, there's a roof access, and my outside drones had a good view of it. I climbed the ladder up to the roof hatch and popped it. The armor's boots have magnetized climbing clamps, and I used them to cross over the curving roofs to the third habitat, and then around to the second, coming up on them from behind. Even these 2 roads wouldn't be dumb enough to ignore the creeks if I took the quick route and walked over to their position. They were not the sharpest murder bots, having cleaned the floor of the between habitat corridor to cover the prints they had left in staging that body. It would have fooled somebody who hadn't noticed all the other floors were covered with tracked in dust. I opened the roof access for the second habitat and sent my drones ahead, down into the security-ready room. Once they checked the unit cubicles and made sure nobody was home, I dropped them down the ladder. A lot of their equipment was still there, including the drones. It was a nice lock set of drones, but they were useless without no fault-up system. Either it really didn't, or really didn't show. They still kept part of the attention. If it came up suddenly and we activated the security cameras, the rules of the game would change abruptly. Keeping my drones with me, I took the inner corridor and silently passed through its plastic hatch. 3 bodies were piled inside, and humans had tried to secure it and been trapped in their own seconds of
Star, heart, triangle,
When I was close to the
circle,
door with the hatch,
star, square, heart, circle.
I sent the
There's
drones
5.
around for a careful look.
Yeah.
There they were. With no weapons on my drones, the only way to do this was to move fast. So I threw myself around the last corner, hit the opposite wall, crossed back, and kept going, firing in their positions. I hit the first one with 3 explosive bullets in the back and 1 in the faceplate as it turned toward me. It dropped. The other one I nicked at the arm, kicking out the joint, and it made the mistake of switching its main weapon to its other hand, which gave me a couple of seconds. I switched to rapid fire to keep it off balance, then back to the explosive bolt. That dropped it. I hit the floor, needing a minute to recover. I had taken at least a dozen hits from both of their energy weapons while I was taking out the first one, but the explosive bolts had missed me, going past to tear up the corridor. Even with the armor, bits of me were going numb, but I had only taken 3 projectiles to the right shoulder, 4 to the left hip. This is how we fight. Throw ourselves at each other and see whose parts give out first. Neither unit was dead, but they were incapable of reaching their cubicles in the ready room, and I sure as hell wasn't going to give them a hand. 3 of my drones were down too. They had gone into combat mode and slammed in ahead of me to draw fire. One had gotten hit by a stray energy burst and was wandering around in the corridor behind me. I checked my 2 perimeter drones by habit and opened my comm to Dr. Mensa to tell her I still needed to clear the rest of the habitat and do the formal check for survivors. The drone behind me went out with a fizzle that I heard and saw on the feed. I think I realized immediately what that meant, but there may have been a half second or so of delay. But I was on my feet when something hit me so hard I was suddenly on my back on the floor. Systems failing. I came back online to no vision, no hearing, no ability to move. I couldn't reach the feed or the comm. Not good, Murderbot. Not good. I suddenly got some weird flashes of sensation, all from my organic parts. Air on my face, my arms, through ribs in my suit, on the burning wound in my shoulder. Someone had taken off my helmet and the upper part of my armor. The sensations were only for seconds at a time. It was confusing and I wanted to scream. Maybe this was how murderbots died. You lose function, go offline, but parts of you keep working. Organic pieces kept alive by the fading energy in your power cells. Then I knew someone was moving me, and I really wanted to scream. I fought back panic and got a few more flashes of sensation. I wasn't dead. I was in a lot of trouble. I waited to get some kind of function back, frantic, disoriented, terrified, wondering why they hadn't blown a hole in my chest. Sound came first, and I knew something leaned over me. Faint noises from the joints told me it was a second, but there'd only been 3. I checked the Deltfall specs before we left. I do a half-assed job sometimes. Okay, most of the time. But Pinley had checked too, and she was thorough. Then my organic parts started to sting, the numbness wearing off. I was designed to work with both organic and machine parts to balance that sensory input. Without the balance, I felt like a balloon floating in midair. But the organic part of my chest was in contact with a hard surface, and that abruptly brought my position into focus. I was lying face down, one arm dangling. They put me on the table. This was definitely not good. Pressure on my back, then on my head. The rest of me was coming back, but slowly, slowly. I felt for the feed, but couldn't reach it. Then something stabbed me in the back of the neck. That's organic material, and with the rest of me down, there was nothing to control input from my nervous system. It felt like they were sawing my head off. A shock went through me, and suddenly the rest of me was back online. I popped the joint on my left arm so I could move it in a way not usually compatible with human, augmented human, or murderbot body. I reached up to the pressure and pain on my neck and grabbed an armored wrist. I twisted my whole body and took us both off the table. We hit the floor, and I clamped my legs around the other sec unit as we rolled. It tried to trigger the weapons built into its forearm, but my reaction speed was off the chart, and I clamped a hand over the board so it couldn't open fully. My vision was back, and I could see its opaque helmet inches away. My armor had been removed down to my waist, and that just made me more angry. I shoved its hand up under its chin and took the pressure off its weapon. It had a split second to try to abort that fire command, and it failed. The energy burst went through my hand and the joint between its helmet and neckpiece. Its head jerked and its body started to spasm. I let go of it long enough to kneel up, get my intact arm around its neck, and twist. I let go as I felt the connections, mechanical and organic, snap. I looked up and another sec unit was in the doorway, lifting a large projectile weapon. How many of these damn things were here? It didn't matter, because I tried to shove myself upright, but I couldn't react fast enough. Then it jerked, dropped the weapon, and fell forward. I saw two things: the 10-centimeter hole in its back, and Mensa standing behind it, holding something that looked a lot like the sonic mining drill from our hopper. "Dr. Mensa," I said, "this is a violation of security priority, and I am contractually obligated to record this for report to the company." It was in the buffer and the rest of my brain was empty. She ignored me, talking to Pin Lee on the comm, and strode forward to grab my arm and pull. I was too heavy for her, so I shoved upright so she wouldn't hurt herself. It was starting to occur to me that Dr. Mensa might actually be an intrepid galactic explorer, even if she didn't look like the ones on the entertainment feed. She kept pulling on me, so I kept moving. Something was wrong with one of my hip joints. Oh, right, I got shot there. Blood ran down my torn suit skin, and I reached up to my neck. I expected to feel a gaping hole, but there was something stuck there. "Dr. Mensa, there might be more rogue units. We don't know. That's why we need to hurry," she said, dragging me along. She had brought the last two drones with her from outside, but they were uselessly circling her head. Humans don't have enough access to the feed to control them and do other things, like walk and talk. I tried to reach them, but I still couldn't get a clear link to the hopper's feed. We turned into another corridor, and Oversay waited in the outer hatch. She hit the open panel as soon as she saw us. She had her hand weapon out, and I had time to notice that Mensa had my weapon under her other arm. "Dr. Mensa, I need my weapon." "You're missing a hand and part of your shoulder," she snapped. Oversay grabbed a handful of my suit skin and helped pull me out of the hatch. Dust swirled in the air as a hopper set down 2 meters away, barely clearing the habitat's extendable roof. "Yeah, I know, but..." The hatch opened and Rati ducked out, grabbed the collar of my suit skin, and pulled all three of us up into the cabin. I collapsed on the deck as we lifted off. I needed to do something about the hip joint. I tried to check the scan to make sure nobody was on the ground shooting at us, but even here my connection to the hopper system was twitchy, glitching so much I couldn't see any